folks, I'm L.A. Little and this is your weekly TA Wrap, where we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective, each time asking ourselves what happened last week and what might it tell us about the coming ones. I do the show every Sunday night live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of the snowy Rocky Mountains. We got snow out there today. What is this? This is May, isn't it? Yeah, May 11th. That's the Rockies, baby. If you want to ask me questions, shoot them over 303-912-9110. Text me or support at TA Today. I'll pick them up from either spot. As far as last week, what happened? Well, they were up slightly, pretty much across the board. Not a lot really went on. The strong ones, a more sideways hang. The weak ones, especially the weakest one, the Russell, back down, a lot more pressure. So let's look at these guys. Let's try to make some sense of what's happening. I've got the weekly up on the S&P 500. Folks, it's the same story it has been. You know, I know you're getting tired of this. I know I'm getting tired of this. You know, we've had kind of this hang going on here for a long time. It still is. There are highs here that it's trying to get up and test. It actually had a nice push up last week. This week is an inside week doji, right? So when I'm looking here at the S&P, all I see is hang and the potential for more test. 1891 is the first one. 1898, I believe it was this one. 1897. So, I mean, we're sitting at 1878. To get up there is not that many points. I mean, we're moving 10, 15 points a day anyway. With the volatility. It's just a question of whether it can get up there, and then of course if it does get up there, can it actually get over it. The Dow Jones still trying to test the top. 16,631.63. It got to 16,620 the week before last week, 1622 this week. So you're within 10 points 2 weeks in a row, no volume. It sure as heck looks like it wants to try to hit it, but I don't know how it's going to keep going even if it does. That's the strong ones. If you go over to the weaker ones and we look at the NASDAQ on the weekly, the NASDAQ still looks the same as well. Inside week, didn't go anywhere, not really a doji, but somewhat of a doji. I didn't talk about the ABCD structures. We still have the ABCD structure potential in place to take us deeper on the NASDAQ. If I go back, pull up the S&P 500, it already has an ABCD structure up on the Dow Jones, right? Trying to do the same thing here on the weekly with the S&P 500. So you can see all across the board, both here and on the NASDAQ, you've essentially got, how shall we say, competing structures and competing indexes in terms of weakness and in terms of strength. If I look at the weakest of them all, that's the Russell. The Russell actually on a daily chart, let me pop to the daily here, on the daily chart actually broke a swing point low. That's a suspect break. It's coming back as a result of that and doing an immediate retest, regen attempt. That bar that was broken is here. If you come back immediately and it's into it one bar already, if it can stay in there another bar, start to move back up this way, right, then you have the potential for this thing to come all the way back to the top. That's just 1131 area, top of this bar. That would still be a pretty good push from here, 20 points. That definitely would make some folks think if it were to drive all the way back up there. But that's kind of the setup here, if in fact it can stay here for another bar. I mean, that's the way this usually works. So that's on the daily. You did get a break. You didn't break the second of the two, and we didn't break on the weekly. The weekly actually held. That low was 1099.67. You tested into it. The volume 1.6. The volume 1.6, slightly heavier volume. All that suggests it's going to try to come after it again. But folks, you can be right and still be wrong if your timing's not good. And if we go back and look at that daily, if this thing starts to pop back up tomorrow and hold, right, then it can certainly make it all the way back up to the top of that bar, and that would make it very uncomfortable for anyone trying to short this thing. ABCD structure, yes, it's in place. Didn't talk about that yet, but here on the daily, it's already got the ABCD going on the bearish side, trying to press lower. We'll see if it actually can activate, break the other swing point low, and break the weekly low in so doing. And that's the danger out here, right? Russell been the weakest, wants to go lower. S&P's, Dow been the strongest, want to go higher. On Thursday, you actually had the Russell trying to make, well, actually making new closing lows on the year at the same time that the Dow and the S&Ps were trying to make new highs. That's how divergent this market is here. And that's, you know, that's not a normal activity. That doesn't happen very often. So you can see the divergence. You can see just how bifurcated this market is. And when I talk about it, you know, the breakdown that can happen here can certainly take us lower because it would break multiple swing points, multiple time frames. But as I talked about here in this article, and this article's gotten a huge number of hits because of the title that MarketWatch decided to put on it, the stock market is ripe to fall. I did say it was, I guess, ripe to fall in some way. I was simply talking about a setup that, if it triggers, can set off a fast move down, and it's a high probability trade. That was what the article was about. Of course, they ramp it up, and then of course people start talking about, I'm making the big call. I'm not making a big call. I'm simply making a call on a very high probability trade if it triggers. Almost triggered Thursday and Friday, flipped around, hasn't triggered yet, and if it comes all the way back up here and people are short down here, it's going to be hard to hold it. And that's the issue, and that's what I mean by being right yet still being wrong. You can still lose your money even though you might know what the trade is going to eventually turn out to be if you're not careful about how you go about getting into it. Let's pop over to the sectors, and let's just quickly run through 2 or 3 of these that are interesting. First one is the transports. Transport's pushing up to the high, hasn't tested it yet. Looks like it wants to try to test that high, but these guys, you know, they look to me like they're running out of juice. If you do have structures in a lot of these that are playing out, ABCD structures that have been in place. They could go a little bit farther, and that's the strong one. Another strong one has been the XLE. If we pull up the XLE, that one on a weekly basis had its run. ABCD structure up, more than completes it. Right now, you finally get a 2-bar reversal up here at the highs. 2-bar reversal back down the other way. So that essentially is you have an extended run, you get over, you get under, less volume. That one should come back on this time frame. And if you look at it on the weekly, it's already, on the daily, it's already doing it. But it's got 2 nice big support bars as it comes back into this area. Also, it would be a retest regen. That would definitely, if it were to come back into this area, would definitely be a buy, right? Coming back into that zone. You got this big bar here with huge volume on it inside the zone where you should find buying support to begin with. That's a recipe for a nice bounce because it's more than 6 bars already. But it's got to get back down there, and then we'll see what it wants to do. The ideal would be that you'd want to trade it long. XLF. Now, we've got 4 indexes that still are failing. They failed each and every time they've come up, with the exception of one that got over and then quickly failed right afterwards. And what I'm talking about is failing off this April 10th bar on the daily, which is the April 7th bar on the weekly. You can see you come down, You come down with volume, you break down, right? Now you're going back up, you're testing. Folks, if you can't get over something, then that says you're going to go back the other way. And right now, that's the way these are trying to set up. And the right, and to go back the other way would take them down to swing point lows. That's the XLF. That one's failed a couple times on the daily already, and you can see it on the weekly as well. The XLK is another one. XLK actually got over it here, but couldn't stay over it on the weekly. That's the test there. Excuse me. That's also ABCD structure, but it's a very small one. Won't get that deep. That looks like a failure trying to come back as well. That's on the weekly. The other two, healthcare. If you look at the healthcare market, you get the same situation, exact same setup as you saw in the XLF. Goes up, it tests, can't get over it, right? This is an ABCD structure also triggering there, and now it's trying to do it again. Would take it down into the lows. That's the XLV, and then we look at the last one, which is the XLY. XLY also same situation. Test back into that breakdown bar, can't get over it. This also has an ABCD structure on the way down. It hasn't completed. That also takes it back into swing point lows. So you can see on the sectors, right, there is the opportunity to trade these things lower once again. And I didn't actually mention it here, but you're actually going to have nested ABCD structures if this breaks. And that gives you a higher probability that you come down there to that area if they break. The only really strong one out there still is the XLP. XLP just keeps working higher. Nothing wrong with that chart. Absolutely nothing wrong with that chart. XLU is the other one that had been strong, but the XLU has finally failed, and the XLU is going to come back and set up some sort of a range. If you look at it from the perspective of what it's done, right, you had an ABCD structure, you finished it, right? That's pretty much done. Now what do? You leave volume at the top. That's usually a good signal of some sort of a blow-off move. That usually sets up some sort of a range trade. And on this particular one, you would think the first part of that range trade would be to come back and do the retest regen off that prior high. So that's what I believe the utilities are trying to do. Another one that's still strong, XLI, hanging at the highs. XLB, hanging at the highs. So you still have some strength out there. It's just not you know, like the indexes themselves. It's not a clear-cut case that you're going to go one direction or the other. You got some still going sideways. You got others trying to break down, and you have one strong one still. If I look over at the OX markets, and in particular look at the dollar and look at the bonds. Let's start with the dollar. Draghi comes out and he promises that he's going to use his meeting in June to shoot these markets higher, do some more easing, right? So the dollar, what does it do? Flips around, testing all these lows, flips around and holds. Volume a little bit lighter, not much, but a little bit lighter. That thing's going to come right back the other way and try to test back in to these, probably this area here. So the dollar holds. Now, that doesn't mean a lot to the market because in the short term, the market can do anything with the dollar. If the dollar really were to strengthen over a longer period of time, that would make it hard for gold. It would make it hard for the general market as well. But right now is a key hold on the dollar. It didn't look like that was going to be the case because as you can see, it was a big gap down, and now you flip around, you leave an island reversal essentially, and you're back the other way. Although I don't pay that much attention to island reversals, especially in the dollar. The other big news was the TLT. Now the TLT, if you look at it on the daily chart, the TLT, on the weekly chart, the TLT had an inside day on lighter volume. We know that it was coming up to test into the swing point high area, in particular into this breakdown bars top. That's where it was trying to get. It's not that much farther to go. It still can get up there with this particular structure. That also is an ABCD structure to the upside. That's almost done. So you can see how that still is the target, but you're getting close now. So bonds have probably made the bulk of their move. If you look at it on the daily, you're fading back in. You're coming back in to do a retest regen. Not so much a retest regen because we'd already done that. I take that back. It is a retest regen. I don't think this one got into it. 1130. Well, it did. So essentially you had the retest regen on the next bar, and now you're coming back. So the breakout bar still, that's the bottom of it is 110.84. That's where the volume is 11.5. You're coming back with 6. I suspect this first time back, you're going to see the bonds hold here. It's a good chance that they will hold in this area. And they're almost there, so we'll know it right away. If they do hold there, bounce back up here, test that. Again, you got a high volume high. I suspect it will make it back up there at some point, and that push on the weekly could take it up to about this area. And if you think about how that might play out, well, there's your ABCD structure, and this one has been doing ABCD structures all the way up, right? One after another, all the way up. So it wouldn't surprise me to see one more take it up, finish off this big move it's been trying to make. Maybe that coincides with the markets pulling back. Maybe we come back deeper and then eventually make a larger run on the weekly itself, and that coincides with a bigger sell-off. It's not clear. What is clear is you're almost done here. The markets have been able to escape that, markets being the listed issues, while you've seen difficulty in the small caps and the NASDAQ. FXE, here's the big pushback down on the FXE off of the Draghi, and we'll talk about Draghi here in a second as we go to the world markets. And gold couldn't do anything, pushes back down. It was trying to push up. We'll see if gold gets back in there and test again and whether it can hold or not. I think there's a good probability that gold actually is going to come back and test the lows again, given the setup. Moving to the world markets and talking about Draghi. So the European Central Bank, headed by our friend Super Mario, has decided that the only thing left to do is to promise another big promise, this time with a time limit on it, which, as we all know, is like the hardest thing to do, to tell us where something's going and when, and that's what he's done. And if you look at Europe is rejoicing in the fact that we're going to see more quantitative easing, or at least rate cuts across Europe. Europe, big bars, big accumulation. They tested the top, had volume. They should test it again. That's the CACs. The FTSE's not quite to the highs, but it's going to try to get there. You can see it pushing up towards them. Volume not as good there, but okay, it can actually do the test. And then the DAX. The DAX actually had nice volume pickup last week. I suspect it's going to get in there and try to test the highs again. So, and in all these, if they break, right, they've got ABCD structures too. You can see it cleanly here on the DAX. All of these have ABCD structures to take them over the highs if in fact they trigger. That's Europe, and that's in spite of the Ukrainian situation, and that's as a result of another central bank, which I did talk about not that long ago, that it looks to me like what's going to take these markets higher, if we go higher, is going to be central bank interventions, either in Europe or in Japan. And it looks like it's going to be in Europe to start with. Talking about Japan, Japan's still pressing, and I suspect what's going to happen is they're going to break out these lows before it's over. That's going to force their central bank to force its hand. In Taipei, we're up testing those highs on the daily. That's a failure at the highs, it looks like. So I suspect this one's going to work back in again. And if I look at Hong Kong and I look at China, the large cap 8 shares, here's those large cap 8 shares. They're quickly coming back to the kind of critical point here. That low is 94.83. That really has to hold, or you're going back for the lows again. And Hong Kong has the same sort of a setup. Hong Kong coming back, critical price point here, 21,590. It's not that far away. That's also going to be kind of a make or break, because if you get past those lows, folks, that's where the last volume spurts were. That says that all of that was just short covering, and that was a heck of a short covering move. In fact, that's the way it ends up. Okay, so that's the world markets, that's our markets, that's the idea coming into tonight. I've got a couple things emailed to me. Let me pop over and see what those are. Let's see here. Okay, take a look at ITM. So hang on, let me pop these in here and let's see what we got. And he wants to look at them on the intermediate term time frame. So ITM, let me see, what is this? This is a biotech company. So this is Interimune. Had a huge spike up. Fades back, coming back up. I don't know. When I see something like this, the first thing I think about is range trade. And I don't know what this big spike was. I'm assuming as biotech there was some FDA ruling or something. To me, this is your range trade. Inside that range trade, you have two halves. So what I would do is focus on the ranges, and I'd focus on this part of it and that part of it. And when you have something like this, you're trading one-sided, which is the long side. So you're looking for places to step into it. Let's see what it looks like on the daily real quick. Okay, so there's a big gap up. Yeah, I don't know. There's just it's hard to trade this stuff. This is an ABCD structure that's pretty much just finished, right? You had one here that pretty much just finished off. So I don't think this is going anywhere yet. You got a bunch of highs up here, but you've already had a huge move. It takes a long time to digest something like that, unless another news event comes out and spikes it again. And I don't know exactly what biotech they're working, but if they get another ruling or something in their favor and a huge market unfolds, then you can see this thing spike again. So what you want to do, though, is try to concentrate on places to get in. On that daily chart, on that weekly chart I just showed you, I was showing you two halves. Well, look at where they are. You're one half here, one half there, and why? Well, that's the low. That's the way those things divide up usually. So I would be looking in that price point. It looks like about, let's see what we got here. That low is 20, 30, 20. Let's look at the next one, Harmel. These guys are meat products, and on a weekly, it's just pushing back up to test a high. That would be an ABCD structure if it could trigger. Actually, it's from there. So I could take you up a decent piece. Yeah, this has good volume flows. I had some problems earlier. I don't know what the issues were back here, but it's over those issues, over those highs, did its test, right? Now it's working its way up. There's nothing wrong with this chart. It looks fine. Let's look at the daily right quick, see if there's anything on it that looks different. And no, I don't know that it's going to break out yet, but it does look like it's going to go test those highs. So it looks okay. What's the other one here? HNT, what is this? This is HealthNet. This is a healthcare plan. Okay, so healthcare plans. All right, the whole sector, healthcare plans, is taking off. So it doesn't surprise me to see this one doing the same. And I'm sure this has to do with the Obamacare. That one just finishing off an ABCD structure too. Nice push on volume. What you want to do is you want to try to get a retest regen here off this high. If it comes back within 6 bars, it can come deep back into here. If not, then into that price point. That's where you ought to be looking if you want to try to get on board. Let's see what the big spike over them. So I would be looking for a fade back into these highs, 35.70. It may take a while, but that's where I'd try to get on board. So that's 3 stocks, questions on 3 stocks that were asked. Let's see what else we got here. So any questions on the boards? IDNY. Let's see what this one is. Okay, let me get it typed in here. And IDNY. Oh, yeah, man, I'm sorry, I forgot. Was it IDNY? I did not check on this, and I know we talked about it. That doesn't look like the right symbol. I'm not getting anything on it. You're going to have to give me another symbol. But I didn't do the work I promised. I promise I'll do it tonight. I'll do it as soon as I get off the air. But give me the symbol again because I don't have it. INDY. Okay, cool. INDY. I remember talking about this. Sorry, Tommy. So it broke. Oh, the Indian. Oh, yeah. I was wondering what the makeup was. Okay, so India actually got a huge pop last Friday on elections, right? And the whole market, the Indian market went up like, I think it was like 600 points or something. Let me pop up India right quick. And this is the Nifty 50, and it looks to me like that. I didn't do anything but do a little bit of reading, but I didn't actually dig in to see what it was. That's the weekly. You can see the pop, but you can see it here on the daily. Big pop up. It just looks like that other chart we were just looking at. I will do the work and see. I believe, just looking at the action, this looks very similar to the Indian market, and so I think the weighting is almost the same. So it looks to me like you have a weighting structure that is about identical. This range breakout started on March 28th. Let me go back to the index itself, March 28th. Yeah, see, it's almost the same. So that looks to me like it's almost a mirror image of the Bombay index, the Sensex. So I'll look it up for sure, though, and look it up tonight and see what it is. I'll do it as soon as I get off. Sorry about that. You're not sure? Well, we'll see what it is. It's certainly tracking it pretty close. It's not that far off, which makes me think that the weighting doesn't look like it's that different. So, all right, folks. So, I got a couple minutes here. Let's go back and just think about the markets for a second. So you really, economic news, it's been good, right? It hasn't been bad, but it's not been great. Now, if it really starts getting really good, then we can see these markets work higher off of economics. But more than likely, they're going to work higher. If they work higher, they're going to do it off of the central banks. And right now, we've got the European Central Bank telling us, or at least it's been interpreted as they are going to ease in June. What you really want to watch over the next week or so is, does he start backing away from that? If he does, then that's a whole different story, right? Euro will strengthen, markets will weaken. Central banks usually have to be forced into something, and it doesn't look like they need to be forced into it yet. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Draghi actually back off that statement in the coming week or so. The other thing is earnings really have been a bust. They haven't been able to move the market up anymore. A bust in the sense that there wasn't no juice in them. Far more companies sold off than actually jumped. Those earnings are coming to a close this week. You got retail earnings this week. They usually wrap everything up. I don't look for them to do anything, but actually in a way it may be a positive that they're not there causing problems anymore comparatively. So economics probably not going to do anything this week. There will be a few reports. Earnings certainly probably not going to do anything. You do have the Russian situation, could be a problem, and if Draghi starts to back off, that could be a problem. Otherwise, Europe's going to hang, try to push new highs, and our market, it's still bifurcated, can go either way. There's a lot of evidence that it wants to try to trade lower, but as we saw with the Russell, if we get a push up tomorrow, this thing could bounce one more time, and we could see it bounce again before it tries to break down. I think breaking out the highs is going to be hard, and actually breaking those highs out and actually climbing off of them is going to be even harder. If I had to assess risk, I would assess it to the downside over the next couple of weeks. All right, that's the weekly view, and I appreciate you being there, tuning in. Tell a friend, tell two, I'm LA. This is, and it was, your weekly TA wrap. Have yourself a great night, take care, and until next time, I'll see you then. Good night, folks.